I can't believe I am saying this, but after just a couple of days ago, Karl Anthony Towns dropped 60 and Joel Embiid dropped 70. Once again, we've had two star players in the NBA dropping 60 points and 70 points. What the hell? Hello everybody, welcome to Oscar Rusty Buckets. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. After I get past the intro, I like to advertise the main channel video that I'm promoting at the time. However, I think this subject already covers that. The video being, has offense gone too far in the NBA? Well, let me just tell you this. So when Embiid and Cat had that performance, it was the first time in the NBA since 1978 that two players had 60 plus points in the same day. Then, what is it, 4 days later, it happens again with Luka and Booker getting 70 and 60 apiece. Previously, it was a 46-year-long streak of this not happening, and then it happened again, and that streak lasted 4 days. What the fuck? Seriously, I don't know how to react to this. When I heard that Luka had 70, I was like, give me a break. There's no way. I knew that he had a big first half, but 70 again, just a couple of days later. I believe Dame had his 70 piece first, and then it was Donovan Mitchell. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was at least a couple of weeks in between it. We got a couple of days at least to recover from the concept of one player having 70, let alone to immediately broach that with another player having 70. You know, I was listening to the Coping Hour podcast hosted by the beautiful editor of this channel, Nicholas. He said in the video, and this video was uploaded like a day ago, like right before this Luka game, that we've had 3 70-point performances in the last 2 seasons, and I was like, nope, that already aged poorly. Already it's been 4, and you're technically incorrect. That's the NBA that we are in right now, that we just have players dropping 70, and it's not even a big fucking deal. To give you an idea of how much of a not big deal it seems to be at this point, I headlined the Terry Rozier video, the most recent, that video on this channel, I think is the second most recent upload. It was originally titled in relation to the Embiid 70 piece. It was a 10 out of 10. Video didn't do well at all because everyone was like, yeah, so what? Someone scored 70. Not a biggie, apparently. Not a big deal. But it is a big fucking deal. And I don't understand how we're acting like it's not. I don't know why Terry Rozier being traded to the Miami Heat somehow ended up being a better performing video, so we had to change the title and thumbnail. It's fucking ridiculous, honestly. So just to go game by game here, first it's the Mavericks versus the Atlanta Hawks. Luka has 73 points, which I think is tied for the 4th highest scoring performance of all time. I think Wilt had like 77. He obviously had 100. Kobe had 81, and Wilt had 73 2 times. So it's a 3-way tie for 4th place, and Wilt Chamberlain has 4 of the top 5 or 6 or however many spots. Regardless of that, 73 points, 91% true shooting. 58% is the league average, in case you were curious. I believe the score was like 144 to 140 or something like that, or 139. Incredibly close game throughout, which is the reason that he was able to get that amount of points, because it felt like normally under normal circumstances, especially because he had 41 first half points, that probably would have closed out the game, but it wasn't doing it because the Hawks were doing a great job on offense. They just weren't doing such a great job on defense. Neither were the Dallas Mavericks. These are both high-octane offensive teams that are not particularly strong on the defensive end, so it's not necessarily surprising that this is the matchup where we get a very high-scoring game. Just to harken back to the point of like the NBA needing to add more defense back to the game, like obviously it's cool that this happened. I like that these performances happen. 70 points happening is cool, but I also want 70 points to happen in a context in which I don't think it's undervalued, and it can be a cultural moment. Like when Kobe had 81 points, that was a cultural moment. That was a huge thing in the sport. It was all anyone talked about for quite a while. But, you know, Dame had 70. We talked about it for a day or two. Donovan Mitchell had 70. We talked about it for a day or two. Joel Embiid had 70. Didn't even seem like we fucking talked about it at all. And now Luka, 73 points. I don't even know if this video is going to do well, which is insane to think about because for all intents and purposes, something like this happening should just be like a guaranteed 1 out of 10, but it's very much not. It's not going to outperform the Doc Rivers video. I know that much. A coaching change is a bigger deal than a 70-point performance because that's the state of the NBA right now. Luka, he attacked multiple different ways. It was primarily, though, it was not that hard for him to get into the paint. When he does, Luka has this like super deadly drag step where he just fucks up the timing of anyone who contests him and just hangs in the air for half a second. Realistically, he's not even really hanging in the air, but you know, he's just holding the ball up, waiting for the defender to go by, and then he shoots it. He got him on that multiple times. Obviously, another very signature part of the Luka Doncic approach is the step back three. He burned them with a couple of those. Didn't really get into his mid-range bag too much on this one, but he really didn't need to because he either was burning a three or he was just getting to the rim relatively easily. There's definitely a compilation that can be made from this game of the Hawks just playing pathetically bad defense. Like defense I think even I could score on, you know, 1 out of 100 times because I'm nowhere near an NBA player. But even still, bad defense for sure. Couple of very open lanes, something that is just guaranteed points for Luka Doncic. So that was that game. Then we had the Devin Booker performance where he had 62 points. Unfortunately, similar to the Karl Anthony Towns performance, also an L. Also a game that his team did not win. Again, I mean, a 60-point performance and a loss isn't as surprising as a 70, and that didn't happen in this case, but geez, that's just absolutely absurd. For Devin Booker, obviously, they have different play styles, so his approach was far more from a mid-range perspective. He did hit like 3 threes, I think, like right out of the gate, but for the most part, it was mid-range shooting. There's also this really filthy move he pulled out in the first quarter where he like did a half spin, completely lost his defender after immediately catching the ball, and then fadeaway baseline that went in. Honestly, I didn't see Booker hit a layup until like the third quarter. He was just hitting jumper after jumper after jumper. He got to the free throw line a little bit because he got fouled on some of these, but for the most part, it was really just pure buckets. And even with like Luka Doncic had what, 16 free throw attempts? You know, for Luka, that's pretty standard. 16 is not all that uncommon of an amount of free throws for him to get. It's probably only like 5 or something more than his average attempts. However, that illustrates that this was just mostly pure buckets. He hit like 25 shots in this fucking game. That's insane. That's so many fucking shots. And a point that I've made in the offense video is that the offense tends to blend together after a while, and that especially becomes true in these super high scoring offensive games. Like, you know, you could kind of summarize Joel Embiid's 70-point performance with just like a drop step dunk and a mid-range fadeaway from like the elbow. Not that that's an inaccurate way to describe his game in general, but eventually it just all starts blurring together. In the case of this game, the pull-up threes, the drives inside really kind of blended together. For Devin Booker, the mid-range shooting really kind of blended together. These were enjoyable games to watch, but there's just a little bit of an asterisk next to all of it, which is just that the defense isn't good. And as I point out in my offense video, like, if the defense isn't good, the offense doesn't feel as earned, and thus the offense isn't nearly as cool as it otherwise would be in that context. There's a lot of people who have been talking about the game that Kobe had 81 points, and ironically that was about 5 days ago. Well, 18 years and 5 days ago. The anniversary of it was 5 days ago, same day that Embiid had his 70 piece. People were pointing out, like, if you actually look at all of the 70 pieces throughout history, there's some in the 60s. I think there's a couple in the 70s. I don't know if there's any in the 80s, but I know there's one in the 90s from David Robinson. I'm pretty sure David Thompson had one of his in the 70s. I could be mistaken on that. Maybe it was the early 80s. I don't know. But like the 90s, you got the one from David Robinson, and for the 2000s, you got the one game from Kobe having 81 points. The 2000s were the lowest scoring era in NBA history, at least in the shot clock era. 96 points per game was the average team points per game in the 2000s. So scoring 81 points in that context is pretty fucking ridiculous. And genuinely, I mean, who's to say really about the Wilt performance, because we don't really know. But the 81 point performance has to be the most impressive scoring performance, at least that, you know, has video of it. I don't think it's even close. Obviously, the Toronto Raptors were one of the worst defensive teams in the league when Kobe played them. That's generally how it's going to go if you're going to score this many points, because just like with, you know, Luka's 70 piece or Embiid's 70 piece, we're talking about the Spurs, one of the worst defenses in the NBA, the Hawks, one of the worst defenses in the NBA. So it is what it is. However, in an era where 96 points per game is the average, where a defense that holds its opponent to 96 points per game is an average defense, that still means the Toronto Raptors are a way more fucking impressive defense in 2006 than any defense in the NBA, really, period, in the context of that era, of course. Having the rules, being allowed to do what they're allowed to do on defense, more physicality, a mild, albeit mild, but still there, amount of hand checking, because it wasn't fully gone. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. It's insane that scoring is the way that it is. It feels devalued to a degree to me. All kudos in the world to these guys and their performances, but it's just not what I think is good for basketball at large. It's impressive that they did it, but it's not as impressive as it should be. That's really what I'm getting at. It's not as impressive as it should be, and as a lover of basketball, I would like to not feel like there's a level of an asterisk next to a 70-point performance. I want that 70-point performance to feel authentic and earned, and I want to be able to just purely celebrate it, and not just celebrate it in spite of bad defense. I want to be able to celebrate it because the defense is good enough that it's respectable, and I want it to be uncommon enough and a big enough deal that it exists as a cultural moment, a big moment within this sport, rather than just something that's passing by. So yeah, I'll get off of my soapbox. If you want to hear further thoughts about this, again, go check out that Has Offense Gone Too Far in the NBA video. For the entirety of it, it's basically going over the history of offense from the beginning of the NBA to now, how offense became the way that it has, and I end the video with some suggestions for how things could be changed. It's about an hour long, so get some popcorn if you haven't watched it yet. But I'll quit self-promoing. Overall, the point I'm just trying to make is, like, I would like these performances to be a little bit bigger of a deal, and I think the way the NBA is right now is directly responsible for how much of a not very big deal it seems to be. Shout out to Nick for editing this video. I mentioned his podcast earlier, The Coping Hour. It is one of the best podcasts out there, one of the best, I think the best basketball podcast. It's really the only one I listen to on a regular basis personally. No offense to the Shoot Around. I think that's a pretty good podcast. But yeah, that's it. Shout out to Nick for editing, and goodbye.